Hey guys, how's it going? I hope you're having an awesome day. My name is hamishwhodder, and let's just jump straight into this one. I just want to talk about what is the circle of competence, what do we mean by circle of competence, then I want to talk about the importance of knowing its boundaries, and then how we can use that to our advantage. So let's just jump straight into it. What do we mean by circle of competence? Firstly, the term was coined by Warren Buffett in his 1996 letter to the shareholders, and he described it perfectly. What an investor needs is the ability to correctly evaluate selected businesses. He then goes on to say that you don't have to be an expert on every business or even many businesses. You only have to be able to evaluate companies within your circle of competence. So what Warren is talking about here is the importance of understanding the businesses that you're invested in. And he isn't talking about, oh, I use Facebook, so I understand how Facebook works. What he means is that you need to be able to understand how the company makes money, how it spends its money, and what are the important factors that impact its operation in its industry. The most important part of this quote is that you don't need to understand how many businesses operate. You just need to understand how a few or maybe even one type of business operates. And Charlie Munger touches on this. The size of your circle of competence isn't important. What's important is knowing your circle's boundaries, knowing which businesses you're capable of understanding and which ones you're not. And I see circle of competence as actually being three circles. The first circle is the very inner circle, and this is your circle of competence. This is the businesses that you are capable of understanding thoroughly. For example, most people are capable of understanding how a single restaurant operates. There's not too many moving parts. There's the rented space, there's your employees, the people who are serving and the cooks and that sort of thing. There's the food that you're serving, and then maybe even the interior design. But beyond that, how the business makes its money is essentially how much traffic you can bring in, how many customers you can bring in, and then the cost that you're charging those customers relative to how much it costs to keep the business operating. Then there's the circle just outside of the circle of competence, and this circle represents the businesses that you think you understand, but you actually don't. And this is where people get into the most trouble. For example, a really popular investment right now that I'm seeing is Alibaba. And I would bet my money that most people investing in Alibaba could not accurately explain how it operates. There's that classic Einstein quote, if you can't explain something to a 5-year-old, then you don't understand it yourself. And I would challenge anyone invested in Alibaba to go onto the Wikipedia page and explain to me every aspect of their business, because there's about 30 different types of operations, and that doesn't even include the risk of investing in a foreign company. How about explaining the Chinese economic system? That alone puts me off from making large long-term value investments in China. And don't get me wrong, there are people out there who understand how Alibaba operates. There are people who actually know what they're getting into when they invest in Alibaba. And I'm not talking about those people. All the power to them. If you know how a business operates and you think that there's value there, go for it. What I'm talking about is I'm talking about people who just have read the summary of the wiki page for Alibaba and then think that they know enough to invest 10, maybe 20, maybe even 30% of their wealth into that company. And I am certainly not immune to this. An area in which I thought that I could understand was semiconductors. Now, some of you who follow the channel pretty closely would know that recently I made a video about Lam Research, which is a semiconductor equipment manufacturer. And essentially in that video, I talked about the business, and it's a perfect business in terms of every aspect except for the understanding, but in terms of the moat, in terms of the numbers, it has low debt, it has a high ROIC, the management team's great, it has a great future. Like, it's a really perfect business, but what stopped me from investing in it was that no matter how much I read about semiconductors, I just could not thoroughly understand how the business operates. And I could probably explain to you how they make semiconductors and how they work and that sort of thing, but that's just not enough. There are so many intricacies of semiconductor manufacturing that you would only understand if you've worked in the industry for many years. And lastly, we have the most outer circle. So we have circle of competence, then we have businesses you think you know about but you don't, and then you have the businesses that you know you don't know how to invest in. And for many people, this will include like pharmacy businesses, maybe some tech companies, big conglomerate companies that have hundreds of moving parts. And people generally don't get in trouble here because they are proud enough to admit, or they just know that they're not capable of understanding that business, so they're going to stay away from that area. So to invest successfully, basically what I'm saying here is that you need to try and eliminate that middle circle. Companies where you kind of, but not really understand how they work, because those businesses which are the businesses which will hurt your investments over the long term. All right, so how can you use this to your advantage, and how can you eliminate that middle circle? Essentially, you just have to dig really, really deep into the most basic level of operations in a business. Like we talked about with the restaurant, get down to the very, very raw components and factors that make up the business. And if it gets too complex for you, just don't invest in that company. And it doesn't mean that you can never invest in that company or you can never invest in that industry ever again. But maybe it means that right now you can't, and you just need to learn about it over the next few months or years, and then you will have enough knowledge and enough expertise in order to invest in that company. But for now, you should just stick to companies that are well within your circle of competence. Let me give you an example of a company that I own and explain how it operates. Thor Industries, it's my biggest investment. I've talked about it many times on here. At the most basic level, they are an RV manufacturer, which is caravans for you Australians out there. And essentially, their business is really easy to understand. There's dealerships, which are the retail sellers who sell to consumers. And every time they sell, say, 100 units in a month, they're going to order that same amount of units from companies like Thor Industries. Thor doesn't sell RVs to dealerships on credit. They take payment up front and then they add those orders to their backlog. And those backlog orders are generally a good indication of their sales over the next 2 quarters. Their biggest cost is aluminium, the raw material of aluminium, which goes into their caravans. And it's really easy to estimate the sales of Thor. We just have a look at the retail sales in the industry, how it's growing, and we can multiply that by the average price of an RV, which has been pretty consistently about $30,000 per unit. Some of the other factors that are important for the operations of Thor in its industry are the aging population, as the older generation, the 50+ generation, are the biggest percentage of their sellers, although the younger generation, my generation, are actually becoming an increasingly larger proportion of their revenue due to, I don't know, being popular to go glamping or, living off the grid, that sort of thing. It's not my personal thing, but apparently that is growing in popularity. The second factor is the availability of credit, because most of these RVs are sold through financing on 2 to 5 years of financing. The third factor is fuel costs, which a misconception is that fuel costs is a big factor to the operations of a business like Thor Industries, when it's actually not. And lastly, of course, we have the cost of the raw materials such as aluminium. I hope this kind of video was helpful for those who may have heard the term circle of competence but didn't really understand what it meant. If you want to see more videos where I break down a specific aspect of my strategy like this video, then make sure you leave a like and let me know what you want to see in the comments down below. If you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed, and I hope you guys have a great day. I'll see you in the next one.